Hello, this is Megan Taylor Morrison, and this is our series on self-marriage. I'm here today with Gabrielle Penabaz, also known as Gabrielle St. Evenson, and she's going to tell us not only about her self-marriage, but about her experiences marrying more than 1,000 people to themselves. Thank you for being here, Gabrielle.
Thank you for taking an interest.
You're welcome. It's a joy to take an interest. And let's start with a question that you've considered quite a bit. What does self-marriage mean to you?
It means a commitment, um, as opposed to just living each day sort of mindlessly. You stop and say, what's actually important? And it's hard to do that all the time, but every once in a while, it's nice to just stop and say, how can I be more self-reliant and that sort of thing.
Mhm. And to date, as I mentioned, you've married more than 1,000 people to themselves. How did these people find you?
So because I created it as a performance art piece. When I married myself, it was at one of the many crossroads in my life, and I'd heard about this thing, and I thought that's so interesting, because you could just write in your journal or whatever, but what if you take that and expand upon it? And that's what takes, say, ordinary prayer to the level of ritual, right? When you start adding items or things that are meaningful, and then all those things are basically mnemonic devices, right? All those things help you focus. And it helps you remember in the future when you find yourself slipping. So when you become needy or whatever, those are typical self-marriage things. And there's that difference between the wedding and the marriage,
Mm.
just like between two people, also with commitments to yourself. And so there's the wedding, which is fun. You shop and you make choices. And that's also a very interesting process when you go to those lengths. Um, so I had thought a lot about it. I did it, time passed. Um, then I created it as what's called theater for an audience of one, one-on-one theater, that kind of thing. Um, Now, some people do bring friends. It's not always just one person. But the performance art piece started at different festivals and events. So people didn't even realize that that was available to them. So most people are largely unprepared. So we made it fun. The idea is that there's a kind of reception area where you um, have some pen and paper where you can write vows. Most people, because they're unprepared, I decided to create um, multiple choice vows. And it's all meant in fun. And you
Cool.
can take it completely ridiculous and just say, I commit to always eating chocolate or whatever, but the vows that I suggested were more self-help kind of things like, I will not lie to myself. I will stop calling myself nasty names, even when I'm stressed, things like that. And so what happens is, you take a look at the vows and suddenly you realize, oh, this could go, and whoever's inviting you in will say, don't worry, these are just some suggestions. You can write whatever you want on the back or whatever. Um, and then there's also a bowl of rings, and I always make sure that you can take the ring with you. But then there are rentals. No one's ever paid to in the festival situation. It's always an entertainment kind of thing. So no money is exchanged, but the quota, the idea of the rental is that you have to give it back. So there are costumes, there are bouquets, which as you put together the thing that you hold may have flowers, but there's a whole array of crazy stuff that you can hold, including skulls and beautiful balls and just weird pieces of art and stuff, swords. There's all kinds of things, and you can mix and match, and you can add flowers to your sword and your skull or whatever, and often people do. And then the costumes are meant to be as far from traditional marriage as possible, though I often do throw a couple of things in, because especially it's fun when guys get to play around with veils and things like that. But most people love capes. They love the different hats. You could do a huge crazy top hat. The idea is you're marrying yourself, so it's about you as an individual, and we have so many sides to ourselves.
Mm.
And so in traditional marriage, you have these choices that are considered acceptable or common. And it's kind of fun to mix it up. So people take a minute, and it's more about the fun attention before a wedding, which also points to that we fuss a lot over the wedding, but then how much time do we take really for what we're talking about, which is the vows? So there's this interesting parallel where People will pick their ring and they put their bouquet together and their costume, and it takes them a while. And then when they're ready, they get in line. They start looking at the vows and they go, what am I doing? And that's where the art comes in. That's where I believe art is just meant to touch you in some way, for better or for worse. It's supposed to leave you with a new thought or a feeling, or just move you in some way. And that's really where it starts, because then they go, oh, and they might add something, but often people don't. Some people just tick off every single vow that I suggest. It's like, okay, it's gonna be a long one, here we go. Anyway, so they get all ready, they've got their vows, and then they're walked to the priestess, the encouraging priestess. And if I'm lucky, we set it up so that you do walk through some kind of corridor, which also gives you a moment to get away from your friends and everybody and just kind of shift gears. And then when you come in, it's just us. And suddenly it went from being out in some wacky festival or whatever it is that you're doing, or you're with your kids, or who knows, and suddenly you are with yourself and a witness. And so the way people find me is by accident often. But what happens is, in a 3-day festival, people get wind of it. So by the second and third day, I have people showing up with rings, outfits, vows, they're ready to go.
Wow.
So, and then I may as well finish the process, even though
Yeah.
I'm going beyond your question. So then one of the top things at the top of your vow sheet is you have an option of a self-divorce. So you can divorce yourself of past selves or parts of yourself that you don't like or hurt you. It's also called mini exorcism. So it's meant to make you laugh a little bit, but often people do take it rather seriously. I did a month-long artist in residence in Las Vegas at the Cosmopolitan Hotel. And most of those people had been drinking. So most of those people would burst into tears, which was very intense. Most people don't. Most people just have a strong moment and they say, okay, and they write down the thing they want to get rid of, some painful moment or whatever. Sometimes they just write my childhood, whatever it is. And then we do this kind of fun but intense thing where you really find that moment and then we blast it out into the universe, into a zillion pieces never to be brought together again, et cetera, et cetera. Do a whole thing. I kind of do a moment that kind of jars you. Sometimes they cry, they don't. And then whoever does that always has a better wedding.
Whoever
And I feel like all weddings
first.
should probably include this, where you just a moment aside from all the guests and you just go, and then you're like, da, 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 da. Anyway, so there you are. And then you're in front of a mirror and you then stand in front of the mirror and
Let me interrupt. I've got a quick question of clarification. The weddings are better if they have that moment of release or if they divorce parts of themselves. Which one?
The release is the mini exorcism, is the divorce of past selves.
So they like identify what they want to divorce and then they release it.
Right.
Got it.
So you do this blast of emotion and you get it out of you, little scream therapy, however you want to do it. I encourage people to go a little wild, right?
Yeah.
And then when they calm down, it's like they've really shaken off the outside world and they can suddenly be more open to these vows that they have chosen or even written down. So then I put them in front of a mirror and often people get a little nervous. I'm like, oh, you can't be marrying the floor. Got to marry that pretty girl or that good looking guy or whatever, that beautiful person, whatever is appropriate. And, look into your eyes. And then I whisper the vows in their ears and they have to say them to the face in the mirror. And some people, no problem. But a lot of people, as they say each one, suddenly as they look into their own face, what you have right there is the self-marriage moment. It's accountability. That's really what it's about. And that's why it's not egotistical, because it's not just about a selfie. It's about who am I and what am I doing? And whoa, I've got some bad habits I need to clean up, And then there's positive stuff too, whatever it is people pick. And then after that, we hug. If they cry some more, we clean them up. And then they come out and they get this wonderful photo. You get your wedding photo, right? You come out with your crazy bouquet and your costume and whatnot, and you get a little cake. And if you, depending on the event, if they let us, a little bubbly, sometimes it's seltzer, soda, or champagne if we can. And you have your moment, your wedding. And then we always give them the vows in a plastic sheet, so that even if they carry it around with them for the rest of an event, they can put drinks on, whatever, they can carry it with them, and they're more likely to not throw it away.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's interesting is to catch up with people years later who say, sometimes I look at it, or other people say, oh, I forgot it for years. And then I looked at it and I thought, wow, I didn't realize how much this impacted me. And that's very satisfying. So then people get wind of that when I do it another time. And so there's a whole array of people who have no clue and people who are ultimately very prepared, and everything in between.
Wow. And I love that you get to catch up with some of them after the fact, even years after
Yeah.
the fact. What do you find are the common ways that self-marriage impacts people?
Um, like whenever you've made a promise for something emotional, usually, sometimes it's physical, like I will do my taxes on time every year or something. But whenever you've made a promise and you look later to see if you did it, you're your own judgment.
Mhm.
And there's something about looking at your younger self and your older self and understanding that you have this whole life before and after, and the whole thing.
Mhm.
um that's not a great answer. I'm trying to give you something pithier. What was the question again?
I asked about
The
the common
impact.
ways that it impacts people. And what I got from your first share is that there's a certain level of accountability that this introduces and a certain sticking point in the memory to these commitments. So
That's
as you,
exactly right. I would say that that's the easiest answer, is accountability.
Mhm. Yeah. And has share with us some of the things that people have shared, like, oh, after I married myself, this was the result, or this was the result. What have you seen?
I would say the result that is most meaningful is when people do catch their bad habits and correct them. And
Mhm.
after a while, make changes like you would in a marriage. When you catch little things, that little resentments that you create between two people, you have also with yourself. So
Mhm.
when you heal that, that's the most meaningful change that you can see. It's a nice memory to have the wedding, but how do you improve your marriage with yourself, and how do you improve your marriage with yourself? And that is why I named the project Till Death Do You Part, not Till Death
Mhm.
Do Us Part. Because
Yeah.
you're in this with this person forever. You're no, everyone else can leave, and there you are. you know, that
Yeah.
same in the mirror.
Wow. And I loved that in our initial conversation, you said self marriage is the least selfish thing you can do. Tell us more about that.
Because every time you mention self-marriage, there are so many naysayers who are like, that's very egotistical. And it's like, that's the most ignorant thing you can say, because clearly you've never done it.
Mhm.
Because the moment anyone does, they realize, oh, this is about being more self-reliant and therefore less needy, less selfish. You're more likely, ideally, to take care of your own needs, the needs that you can, so that you are less of a burden on any partner, a business partner, a friend, a lover, certainly your spouse, your kids, anyone. The idea that you and all of your parts, whether it's uh, your practical side, your romantic side, all of those little emotional aspects have needs. And the more self-reliant you are, the easier you are to be around.
Mhm.
So I think that's less selfish.
Nice. Yeah,
My
it's
opinion.
interesting. Whenever we're making requests in the world, we can do it from a place of self-love, of groundedness, of making a request from help, but from that place that's like self-assured and steady. Um, and we can do it from a place that's like needy, that needs approval, that wants something from other people because we feel incomplete. And I'm with you 100% that this self-marriage process is about reconciling with the parts of ourselves that we want to love more and embrace more, so that whenever we do make requests, one, they're probably going to be more likely to get met, and two, like we're making them from a solid place, not needing to fix something or heal something in ourselves.
Right, especially when you create awareness.
Hmm.
So if you realize that you just need a lot of attention, say, you can get to the core of that hopefully, and start to address how that can create, say, passive aggression. So you're afraid to ask somebody to just spend some time with you. So you create some weird reason for them to come over. And then it's awkward, but they do it and it's fine, but not rah, 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 as opposed to, listen, I just need to vent.
Hmm.
And when you can get clear like that because you're confident enough that if they say no, you're not going to fall apart,
Mm.
then maybe they might be more likely to, because you didn't ask in a weird way or something, and so that kind of clarity just starts coming up in really good ways, and surprises you hopefully, in a good way.
Yeah, you can meet your
And
needs
after a while, it
much more
doesn't surprise you.
quickly.
You're like, yeah, I think I did this right, and maybe you need help, and I need to get away from bad influences or whatever. You start getting very clear about who's around you, and hopefully very appreciative of the good influences and not overburdening them.
Mm, yes. Yeah, when we are clear on what our needs are because we've done the inner work, we can meet those needs more quickly. We know when we can meet them ourselves versus when we need support from others. And I always cite this interview with, it was with Oprah, and I can't remember the woman's name, but she said, my cup runneth over, and whatever runneth over, like other people can have. And like, I cannot give of myself sustainably unless I've cared for myself. And
Like a
so,
lifesaver, right, exactly. So
exactly.
if the lifesaver can't swim, if the person next to you on the plane can't put their mask on, how are they going to really help?
That's
They're going to
right.
drag everybody down. Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah, when we're solid in ourselves, we're able to serve the world more sustainably, with more care, with from our highest and best, right? And not from this place of being depleted and feeling angsty, for instance.
Exactly. And that is why I feel it is not selfish.
Yes. So you told me a story, and we just have to share it with everybody who's watching. We all know that self marriage can have a huge impact, not just on the person getting married, but also on the people who witness it.
Mhm.
And you saw this firsthand. Will you share with us the story from the bar?
Oh, so every once in a while, someone will ask me to preside over uh, their self their self wedding. Um, and it's not in a festival context. So it is full on with the bridesmaids and the cake and the whole thing. And I just come in as a priestess, as one would hire someone to marry you and someone else. So this lovely young man um, finds me and says he's got it all sorted out. I said, great. We had a nice consultation where I explained all the things that I would suggest he needs to get into place so that way he can focus on his vows on that day. And sure enough, he did a great job. His bridesmaids looked hot. He looked beautiful. He was getting over a relationship with a girl that left him feeling depleted, and he wanted to just get solid. All the things great. He gives me the address, and I think, that's in the middle of McDougal Street on West Village in a rowdy bar. I think maybe it's an apartment upstairs in that building. We get there, and it is a rowdy, macho kind of atmosphere. And this gentleman is looking um, very proper in his suit and, you know, could be possibly, I don't know. I was afraid that he would get harangued by the drunk people there, and that they might make fun of him or heckle him. And I'm dressed like, you know, somebody on the cutting room floor of the Narnia movie. Like he wanted me to go full like velvet robe. I had this dark red velvet cloak. And I walk into this bar like a hobbit in the West Village, right? Like by all the frats. And I'm just like, hi. So I think we're in the back and I'm praying that it's just like a separate room. It is not. It is just the back area with like, it's just a couple steps up and another level, and they shove some tables to the side. But everyone else, I think there was sawdust on the floor. It was that kind of place. The music's really loud. They have sports televisions everywhere. And I'm thinking, did he see this place? Because I mean, I could have suggested so many other, but I didn't want to get into it. He had it all together. And he shows up and all his friends are like, uh-oh. But everyone's really cool. And so I just kind of sit down with him and I get all the vows together, and we have like flash paper, and we have this whole ritual set up. So I'm like, all right, here we go. And we asked the management to just turn down the music, and they turned it down a little bit. And they turned off the sports TVs right in that section, but maybe not in others. It was like that. But I swear, the moment we started and his bridesmaids and all the procession started, we just went into it. And so I got into my speech explaining a little bit about self-marriage and and what it is. And suddenly the room starts getting quieter and quieter and quieter. And it's like, okay, well, put out the good vibes. Here we go. And he was a rock star. And the place even had like a mirrored wall. So he ended up having the mirror built in, and he did his vows, and he was quite proud and strong. And at any moment I was just waiting, just in case, but I didn't want to put that energy out. But I thought, I'm ready. I'm ready if anybody's got anything to say. I've emceed variety shows. Like, I'm not your ordinary priestess. Okay. Anyway, at the end, when he finished his most emotional, tender moment, and I pronounced him married to himself, the place erupted in support. And it was so, so powerful and so great. And it just made me so happy, because I thought, thank God. Could have gone so many other ways. And his friends, of course, cheering, and it was just great. And it just taught me not to be afraid. Just do it, and I'll manage, and whoever's doing it is being guided by whatever it is. And it was really good. So,
Yes,
that's that
it's so,
story.
for me, that's such a hopeful story because a lot of times people are not sure if others will support a self marriage. And it's true that not everyone will. And when there's that sincerity, and when people really get what it means, and that it is selfless, and that it is a powerful act of self love, even strangers in a bar can get excited.
Yeah, and probably from from even just some of your work and posting, that people can be quite nasty about it.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, the triggers. And you would think that people would be like, oh, that's weird. No, like they will post horrible, mean stuff. Anybody whom I've seen go viral with it for whatever reason, just just the negativity that also comes out is just mind-boggling. It's just like,
Yes.
really? This is what you're going to get upset about today? Ah, we're in trouble. So maybe you need to marry yourself, fellas.
Well, and
Whew.
tell us about your own self marriage, the thing that got this whole party started.
So I had heard that Rob Brezhnev, who's a fairly famous astrologer, had done a thing at Burning Man where he married people to themselves. But the way he did it was kind of just a crowd shouting, and I'm sure it was fun and like, okay, everybody, da, 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 he's very positive. He has a book called Pronoia, etc., as opposed to paranoia. Anyway, but I thought that was cute, and it was actually the first time I went to Burning Man was that year, was in 2000. And I was having a strange relationship that was one of those things where we were not sure where we stand, and I had to get very clear with him. And I decided to just get clear with myself and attract better things one way or another. And so I decided to take his idea, and I hadn't heard of anybody else. It was just this passing comment. Oh, and then Rob Brezhnev married people to themselves. Oh, wow. And I always love the idea of ritual, because in ritual, you basically make prayer more solid, right? Instead of just thinking, you're also adding visuals, smells, tastes, anything to help you really remember
Mm.
why you're praying for this thing or desiring of this thing, however you want to phrase it, um, setting intention into the world. So when you add stuff, the idea is that it's stronger. You remember it better. You're likely to remember it a year later and you go, oh, I made this promise. I got to uphold for better, for worse, in sickness and health, whatever it is. It's why it's potent. So I decided to go for it. And I did it in the backyard of a friend's house in California, across the country. So it was powerful for a lot of reasons. You know, I got out of my comfort zone and it was fun. And it was something that every once in a while when I would get really down, I'd suddenly go, am I breaking a promise? Do I need a divorce? And that's when the divorce thing came up
Oh,
for when I
interesting.
started doing it for other people. It's like, oh, that nasty side of me. Yeah, that she needs to go.
Yeah.
You know,
I'll keep the
check in
parts that
later.
are kind and loving, but that part, yeah.
Right. So in a way, I've kind of like, you know, remarried myself several times at this point. You know, I'm a child of divorce.
Amazing. You chose not to get married at home on purpose, to get married elsewhere. What inspired that decision?
One was I lived in a very tiny apartment in the Lower East Side. And I could have done it there and it was fun. And I often tell people what's kind of fun about doing it all by yourself, as opposed to, say, a big event that's more like a traditional wedding where you invite people and all that stuff. In fact, for the performance art piece, the tagline is no in-laws required. No bridegroom nor in-laws, neither bridegroom nor in-laws required. Right. So, so you can just be naked, covered in glitter or whatever, chocolate pudding, whatever you want. It's your wedding and you can do it all the time because it's your wedding. So I keep saying that, you know, it's your, you know, just keep making those awareness moments count and make them fun. It's your life. What, you know, who's going to stop you? So that's all well and good. But the reason I chose not to do it in my apartment was because I wanted to create something that would engender fresh experiences. And I was concerned that my apartment would force me into habit, or I would be tempted to answer my phone or suddenly clean something. I wanted to be somewhere completely separate so I could just focus completely on the ritual and not get too engaged in any old habit. So my friend who lived in Beverly Hills at the time, bless him, he was gone for the day and I went into his backyard with all the stuff that I'd bought. I even got like the ring and the nice things to eat and drink, and I'd written it all out. And that was also when I noticed that it would have been nice to have somebody help me preside because it would have helped me focus. So the way I balanced that was by writing it down. So I just kept going to this paper and that sort of took it outside my head a bit. And it worked. I did notice neighbors kind of going, oh God, Steve has a witch visiting or something. You know, you can kind of see them like, but there's a little bit of that. Even though there's a lot of distance, you can still see it's all very open, you know. But lovely backyard, totally new environment, totally different from my urban experience in the city, and it worked. So I would say not doing it at home invites fresh experiences, fresh perspectives.
I love that. What commitments did you make to yourself that day?
I could look them up so that you have them for your book or whatever if you want, for any future video or anything you want. I honestly don't exactly remember, but I'm sure it was basically about not haranguing myself all the time.
Mm,
I have a very harsh inner critic. I
mm,
would say that would be the main focus,
the
to
biggest
be more
piece.
supportive and to just make things easier on myself and to be more aware of my impact on others. How I phrased it, I don't remember, but I know that that was the crux of it.
Hmm. And did you have a honeymoon after your self-marriage?
I went to Burning Man.
I love that.
And by the way, it totally turned into, it was pretty wild. And so I came back and that boyfriend, I was like, yeah, no, we're done. It's fine. It was good.
Like I got clear, I married myself, I went to Burning Man, don't need this anymore.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. It was a cliche that way, even though it was long before um, the Burning Man it is today. It was much rougher. In fact, that was supposedly, I believe it was the year of the worst weather.
Oof.
Yeah, so people go expecting sun. In fact, we had one guy in our little camp who had been the year before and had great weather that year. So he's like, yeah, all we have to do is X, Y, and Z. We had so much cold during the day because the sun didn't hit the ground for 3 days with these insane dust storms, and it rained, which is very unusual during the burn.
Mm.
And so it was really stressful environment wise.
Mm.
And I love that, actually. It forced us to get out of our little whiny, comfy selves and like have fun at all costs.
Yeah.
So things like that. That's why it was good. And it was long before people just showed up with mac and cheese at your door. It wasn't like, it's much rougher and great. Back when they still had fire and more men than women, which was good for a single girl at the time. The girls started showing up in like 2002. It's like, who are all these women? Jesus.
Well, I imagine that there's a few ways that you are able to remember your self-marriage. One being every time you marry someone to themselves, or two being every time you hear about Burning Man, maybe it sparks a
Oh.
little memory. Is there any way that you've ritualized represencing yourself to that day, or any way that you like to remember it, whether it's a picture on your wall or a ring?
To be honest, it was a long time ago. And I've integrated it so much into my life at this point
Hmm.
that there is no one specific thing. I no longer wear the ring. Um, it's more just the memory of the vow of saying, what are you doing? Come on, like, make this better. How can you make this better? I think that was also the main thing. Like, what can I do to always improve a situation? And later the vows, when I started, because the performance art piece thing started 2006. So it was a good 6 years after.
Mm.
And also once I started writing the vows for other people, it was a lot of like, oh, that's good. That would have been, and then that's when I remembered like, well, you could just start doing that now, even though you didn't do it 6 years ago. So by now it's this mishmash that often, as I do other people's weddings, I'm almost kind of redoing them for myself in my head.
Yeah.
Like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, oh that's good. Yeah, I guess I should do more of that.
Nice. So, a final question. In my book, I talk about how intuition can play a really powerful role in self-marriage, whether it's really tapping into your wants and desires for different details of the wedding or improvising something that you want on that day. Did intuition play a role in your self-marriage or in the self-marriages you do for others?
So when you say intuition,
Mhm.
do you mean in creating the ceremony to start? Is that one of the ways you're thinking?
It could be, yeah, any aspect, whether it's creating and designing the ceremony to being in the ceremony and allowing yourself to throw out something that doesn't feel good in the moment and embrace something that does, or even after the wedding, making intuitive decisions based on the experience. So it could happen at any point.
I would say the entire thing is intuitive
Hmm.
because it's all about getting out of the chatter in your head. So I would say meditate in whatever way you do, even if it's just sneaking sushi in your car during COVID or whatever moves you. Stop and listen to what the chatter is really getting at if you can, and that's totally intuitive.
Hmm.
One of the funnest things was when I went shopping for the outfit and the ring and the stuff, suddenly encountering like, why would you choose this over that? And that's when those conversations with the different aspects of yourself really come out. That's completely intuitive. So, you know, what color outfit do I wear? Do I wear a dress or pants or, you know, a fairy, what moves you? And that's whatever moves you to make choices is completely an intuitive process.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, so it sounds like as you went out to make those decisions, you noticed the chatter, other people's opinions, whatever it was in your head.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Um, and then you realize, well, that person's not going to be there. Or even if it's someone that you haven't seen in years, you have to remind yourself, why am I giving this person rent in my head?
Mhm.
Like, who am I marrying here? You know, who is this? Who are these people? They being, kind of apt, regardless of how you actually perceive your gender. We
Mhm.
are all they, you know.
And that's just it, right? Like those noises, those beliefs, those concerns can silence our intuition. And this game of self marriage, like the game of life, it is one in which intuition is one of the power ups. It's one of the boosters that we have.
I think so. And I think intuition is stronger than just, say, an emotional hit.
Yeah.
It's stronger than just thought. It's that part of you that's really connected to spirit, that
Mhm.
is beyond emotion, beyond intellect. Um, like when you suddenly get out of, say, a train station and you automatically want to go this way, but you think, oh, let me check.
Mm.
And your first inclination was the right one. What is that?
Yeah.
It's not even how you feel. It's just that further, that deeper sense of who you are, and getting in contact with that is strong.
Yes. Well, Gabrielle, I have to thank you so much for sharing about your experience with us. So cool to hear the role you've gotten to play in people's lives, helping them marry themselves, and also about your self-marriage that started it all.
Thank you so much.